Tonight, the images still coming in after that strong earthquake hit Southern California.
Tsunami watch after a magnitude 8.7 magnitude quake off the southeastern coast of Russia has now been extended to the California coast.
It began as a deep, muted rumble, the kind Californians have learned to ignore. The ground shivered, glassware rattled, and then it kept going. 10 seconds, 20, 40. The noise deepened into something unfamiliar, something you felt in your bones. Why is it still shaking? It's been over a minute. A man's voice trembled on a phone recording. Car alarms wailed, dogs barked. The air itself seemed to hum. Hours later, the fractures came. Long, unbroken, almost unnaturally straight. They ripped through farmland, parking lots, and stretches of highway with surgical precision. A rancher stood on the edge of one, staring into the blackness. I dropped a stone down there, waited. Nothing. No sound, no echo. Just gone. Cars sat stranded on Interstate 5, their drivers staring at the widening cracks under their feet. Inside the U.S. Geological Survey seismic lab, ANCSA monitors glowed red. We're seeing multiple fault lines activating at once. And there, parallel, one scientist muttered, his face pale. That's not how California quakes work. Another leaned over a satellite image. The slip rate is off the charts. We're not looking at a standard rupture. This is something else. Outside, the fissures stretched for miles, exposing vast, uncharted voids beneath the state. Fields tilted, houses shifted, and entire neighborhoods warped overnight by nightfall. Washington had declared a geological emergency. For the first time in U.S. history, a state was placed under full federal quarantine. Checkpoints rose on every major highway. Airports shut down, coastal ports sealed their gates, trains were stopped mid-route. This is not an evacuation order, the White House press secretary told reporters, her voice strained. This is a containment measure. Freeways stood empty under orange streetlights. Storefronts were boarded up. Airliners sat silent. On dark runways, California's closure was like cutting an artery. It was America's breadbasket, tech hub, and entertainment capital all at once. Gas prices spiked overnight. Grocery shelves emptied in Nevada and Arizona. East Coast markets are in freefall, one news anchor reported. California-based companies have suspended operations indefinitely. By the third day, the land itself seemed to rebel. In Fresno, orchards split down the middle, roots dangling into dark chasms. In San Bernardino, an entire cul-de-sac sank into a bowl-shaped depression, swallowing 3 homes. Engineers admitted defeat. The terrain was changing faster than they could measure it. Even nature faltered. Birds shifted their migration paths as if avoiding something. Whales beached themselves in unprecedented numbers along the northern coast. Steam vents hissed in Yosemite where no vents had ever been mapped. Underground fires burned in cracked soil, glowing faintly at night, like the embers of a dying world, in closed-door meetings. Scientists began whispering about possibilities they couldn't say aloud to the public. Some feared this was the birth of a continental rift, the kind that, over millennia, could split California into a separate landmass. Others suggested something far older, buried deep beneath the crust, was stirring. One satellite pass over the Mojave Desert captured a strange pattern in the earth, a vast symmetrical outline, only visible from orbit. Hours later, new tremors radiated from its center. The readings didn't match any known tectonic activity. And then, without warning, sensors went offline. On the 8th night, people across the quarantine zone reported hearing it, a low, resonant sound, deeper than thunder, rolling up from the ground and through their walls. Some swore they felt it in their teeth, in the darkness, in the stillness after the quakes. It sounded almost like breathing. And that was when the cracks began to widen again. By the 9th day, the quarantine lines had pushed further inland. Nevada Highway Patrol set up concrete barriers 50 miles from the California border. Armed National Guard units patrolled the perimeter. Drones flew overhead, scanning every vehicle that approached. No one in, no one out. Inside the zone daily, life unraveled. In Los Angeles, grocery stores ran out of food. People bartered bottled water for fuel. At night, the city went dark, the power grid fractured by the endless ground shifts. From high above, satellites showed LA like a dead star. Its once bright sprawl reduced to scattered pinpricks of light. But the strangest reports came from the Central Valley. Farmers described hearing sounds from beneath their fields, not mechanical, not seismic, but rhythmic. It's like something moving down there, one said, refusing to let the news crew film his property. The scientific teams that entered the fissures didn't return. At first, officials claimed they'd been cut off by aftershocks, but leaked audio told a different story. The last transmission was garbled, panicked breathing, a metallic scrape, then silence. On day 11, a new phenomenon appeared, pillars of steam erupting without warning across Northern California. In redwood forests, ancient trees toppled. As the ground beneath them liquefied, the coastline itself began to change shape, the ocean swallowing new land each day. Panic bled into the rest of the country. Social media swarmed with theories. Some insisted it was a government experiment gone wrong. Others spoke of ancient fault spirits from native legends, and a few claimed California was not breaking, it was hatching. Then came the 12th night. Along the entire San Andreas, from the Salton Sea to the edge of San Francisco Bay, a faint red glow seeped up from the cracks. Not fire, something else. Something constant, steady, as if lit from a depth no drill could reach. In Sacramento, the remaining emergency broadcast channel played a single automated message on loop. This is a federal directive. Shelter indoors. Avoid fissure zones. Do not attempt to leave the state. Remain calm. But no one was calm. By day 13, the glow from the fissures pulsed like a heartbeat. Seismographs picked up not just tremors, but a repeating pattern, too regular to be natural. It was as if the earth itself had fallen into rhythm with something deep below. Military convoys rolled through deserted towns, their headlights cutting thin beams through the dust. Tanks positioned themselves along major fault lines, their turrets trained downward. No one said what they expected to fight. In San Diego, a deep-water sonar array detected movement, massive, slow and deliberate, traveling beneath the continental shelf. It was miles below, but the displacement was so great it warped tide patterns as far north as Oregon. When the feed was analyzed, the object appeared to be turning toward the California coast. On day 14, the first collapse happened. Entire sections of the Mojave Desert sank, vanishing into a single yawning cavity. The dust plume rose for hours, blotting out the sun. When it cleared, the hole remained. A perfect oval, its edges smooth, as if carved. The president addressed the nation that night. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled as he read the teleprompter. "We are dealing with an unprecedented geological event," he said. "We urge all citizens to remain united." Behind him, the defense secretaries' eyes never left the floor, and then, on the 15th night, every animal in the quarantine zone went silent. No barking dogs, no nightbirds, not even the distant hum of insects. Just silence, until the sound returned. That same deep rolling resonance that people had described before. This time, it was louder, loud enough to rattle glass. Eyewitnesses near the San Andreas claimed they saw the cracks moving, not spreading from quakes, but sliding like the edges were being pushed apart from below. In Los Angeles, a man filming from his rooftop caught a shadow in the glow, something vast shifting in the depths. At 3:14 a.m., all seismic sensors in California went offline. Every single one. And in that silence, the heartbeat stopped. For nearly an hour after the sensors went dark, nothing happened. People stood in the streets, holding their breath. Emergency broadcasts stayed frozen on screen. Even the military convoys stopped moving. Then, at 4:12 a.m., the ground swelled. Not cracked, swelled, like a tide pushing upward from below. Entire city blocks lifted several feet before splitting open. A roar rolled across the state, low and primal, Shaking windows from San Diego to Redding, the red glow blazed brighter, flooding the night with an otherworldly light. From the largest fissures, massive plumes of vapor burst skyward, carrying with them fragments of black, glass-like rock no one could identify. The air grew hot, thick, metallic. Near the center of the San Andreas, the ground gave way entirely. Witnesses later described it as a wall rising from the depths, smooth at first, then breaking apart into colossal, moving segments. From miles away, people could see it, towering over the ruined landscape. It wasn't a wall. It was a spine. Whatever it was, it moved with slow, deliberate force, stretching farther than the eye could see in either direction. The shape curved, segmented, impossibly large. Those who stayed long enough to watch swore they saw it vanish, back into the earth with a single fluid motion, leaving behind a chasm so wide it swallowed entire freeways. Across the Pacific, Japan's deep-ocean monitors registered the disturbance, a wave pattern not seen in any recorded history. Within hours, coastal nations issued evacuation orders for low-lying areas in Washington. The president met with top scientists and military leaders. The closed-door meeting lasted 6 hours. No public statement followed. All questions from the press were deflected inside California. The glow from the fissures faded over the next few nights, but the land never returned to stillness. Small quakes rippled daily, and the shape of the coastline continued to shift. Those who had been there, who had felt the heartbeat, seen the spine, knew it wasn't over. The ground was no longer just ground. Something else lived there now, something waiting. And deep below, in the silent dark, the heartbeat returned. In the weeks that followed, California remained sealed. Satellite images showed entire cities abandoned, their streets dusted with pale ash. Wild vegetation began to reclaim neighborhoods, but it grew fast, too fast. In some areas, trees rose 30 feet in less than a month, their roots following the lines of the fissures like veins. Scientists outside. The quarantine zone studied samples of the black, glass-like rock that had been ejected during the event. Under microscopes, it pulsed faintly, as if carrying its own microscopic current. When exposed to water, it emitted a low-frequency hum, the same frequency as the seismic heartbeat. Coastal shipping lanes across the Pacific were rerouted. Fishing fleets reported dead zones, areas where sonar refused to function, and compasses spun wildly. Divers who ventured too close described vast, smooth surfaces in the deep, like the flank of something asleep. And then came the voices. First in San Luis Obispo County. Then further north, faint whispers carried through the fissures, heard only at night. At first they sounded human, but by the third week recordings revealed something else entirely, a language with no known root, spoken in tones that resonated in the bones more than in the ears. The government called it geoacoustic interference and dismissed it. But those who heard it in person swore the voices weren't speaking to each other, were calling upward. By the 40th day, the tremors returned, not random, but measured. Not the heartbeat this time, footsteps. Day 41. The footsteps grew louder. Instruments in Nevada, Oregon, and even Arizona began picking up the same deep impacts. Each came hours apart, but always in the same direction. East in Las Vegas, casino floors shook with every impact. Tourists screamed as chandeliers swayed and slot machines toppled. The city was evacuated within 2 days. Military roadblocks stretched across every major highway. Entire counties were cleared out. Then, without warning, impacts stopped. Satellite surveillance over the San Andreas. The zone detected heat blooms, hundreds of them scattered across the fissures. They flared and faded in perfect unison, like a signal. Deep-sea listening arrays in the Pacific and Atlantic picked up answering pulses from somewhere far offshore. It wasn't just California anymore. 2 days later, Iceland reported a sudden chain of fissures across its southern coast. Seismologists there described the same heartbeat pattern recorded in California weeks before. Japan and Chile followed within days. Everywhere the pattern appeared, strange vegetation erupted, growing unnaturally fast. The UN Security Council convened an emergency session, but no resolutions were passed. Half the delegates walked out before the meeting ended. The official reason: unverified scientific data. The real reason: fear. On day 50, satellite feeds from California went dark, not blurred, not censored. Dark, as if the entire state had vanished into a void. The airspace above it registered no radar returns. The weather, nothing. And then on every emergency broadcast frequency worldwide, a sound began to play. Not static, not a voice. The heartbeat. Day 51. The heartbeat didn't stop after the first broadcast. Repeated every 38 seconds, on every frequency. AM, FM television, even military comes. No encryption could block it. Engineers in secure facilities swore they could feel it in their chests. Even when their equipment was unplugged, hospitals in multiple countries reported an alarming rise in cases of insomnia, paranoia, and auditory hallucinations. Patients described the same dream, an endless cavern lit by red light, with something enormous moving just beyond sight. In the quarantine zone of California, drone footage from before the blackout was leaked online. The last images showed vast, concentric ridges forming in the earth, as though the land itself was coiling. Between the ridges, dark fissures steamed, releasing a constant haze that tinted the sky, a permanent rust dash. Red dot. Day 55. From the deserts of Nevada, eyewitnesses reported a shimmering distortion above the California border. It wasn't smoke or heat. It was as if the air itself was bending, warping the horizon. Military jets dispatched to investigate simply vanished from radar, their transponders going silent mid-dash flight, far out in the Pacific. Research vessels recorded titanic undersea movements heading toward the continental coasts. These weren't tremors. They were deliberate, directed. Several ships sent panicked mayday calls before their signals cut out entirely. No wreckage was ever recovered. Day 57. The first emergence outside California happened in Chile. A gaping rent tore through the Atacama Desert, hundreds of miles inland. From it rose jagged, obsidian-like structures, not rock formations, but something that appeared built. Within hours, the same heartbeat began pulsing from beneath the ground there. It's perfectly synchronized with California's. Satellite mapping soon revealed a horrifying pattern. The fissures across the globe formed an interconnected network. The segments of something vast, lying dormant beneath the crust. The heartbeats weren't random, they were communication. Day 60, California was no longer visible on satellite, not obscured, gone. Where its coastline had been, there now appeared a churning black surface, like an ocean but with no waves, stretching far inland. Heat maps showed it radiating at temperatures far above boiling, yet no steam rose from it. The blackout spread. Parts of Oregon, Nevada, and Baja California began disappearing from remote sensing. Eyewitnesses who escaped described towering silhouettes moving just beyond the black horizon. Too large to be anything mechanical, their forms bending the clouds as they passed. Day 62. The UN dissolved into chaos. Entire nations began evacuating inland, abandoning coastal cities. In the United States, martial law expanded to cover half the country. Highways became rivers of stalled cars. Fuel and food riots erupted in every major urban center. And then, silence. At exactly 2:17 a.m. UTC, the heartbeat stopped everywhere. Sensors registered nothing. Even the ocean movement ceased. 8 full hours the planet held its breath. When it returned, it wasn't a heartbeat. It was a knock. 3 slow, deep impacts, each one so powerful they registered as magnitude. 8.0 events worldwide. The impacts weren't coming from below anymore, they were coming from above. Day 62, 2:17 a.m., UTC, 3 knocks. The sound rolled across the atmosphere like distant thunder, but there were no storms. The impacts weren't earthquakes. Seismologists confirmed they came from outside the planet. Astronomers scrambled 2-point telescopes upward. For a few minutes, nothing. Then, one by one, observatories began shutting their feeds. Not because of technical issues, because of what they saw. Something vast was eclipsing the stars. No clear outline, only the suggestion of structure. Ridges, lattice, and a pulsing glow, deep within. Its movement was slow, deliberate, and coordinated with the heartbeat. Day 63. Coastal areas worldwide reported the same phenomenon, the sea pulling back, not in a violent tsunami surge, but as though the oceans themselves were retreating from the shores. Beaches stretched for miles further than ever recorded, and coastal residents walked out onto the exposed seabeds, some live streaming the event. Then the ground began to tremble, not beneath their feet, but beneath the water. Something was pushing upward from the deep, in the exposed seabed off. San Francisco, hundreds of black spires broke the surface, each one taller than the Golden Gate Bridge. The air shimmered around them, and people nearby collapsed instantly, their bodies convulsing as if from an electric charge. Cameras caught the moment they were dragged beneath the newly forming black surface, vanishing without a trace. Day 6. The knocks from above grew more frequent. Military satellites detected unidentified objects entering the atmosphere, dozens of them, but these weren't meteors. They slowed as they fell, glowing with the same red hue as the fissures. Most landed deep within already quarantined zones. Others splashed into oceans, sending rings of steam into the sky. From every landing site, the heartbeat intensified, sinking into a single planet-wide rhythm. Global navigation systems failed. Aircraft were grounded. Communication networks fractured. Day 66. The first voice was heard, not in any human language, but deep, resonant tones broadcast directly into people's minds. It bypassed radios and loudspeakers entirely. Those who heard it described overwhelming visions, towering cities of obsidian under black oceans, skies filled with unfamiliar constellations, and something ancient looking back. At them, mass hysteria followed. Some fell to their knees, worshipping. Others clawed at their own ears, desperate to block the sound. Governments issued orders for citizens to remain indoors, though it made no difference. Day 6. Entire chunks of California's coastline began to lift into the air. Not debris, but perfect, solid slabs of land floating upward into the black horizon. As they rose, what lay beneath became visible, a single, enormous eye. It wasn't an eye in the biological sense, more like a lens, multifaceted, each segment reflecting different parts of the planet. The red glow that had haunted California for 2 months now pulsed from deep within it. The lens shifted, as though focusing on us. Day 68. The Pacific itself began to drain, spiraling into a single vortex hundreds of miles wide. Oceanographers had no explanation. The laws of physics themselves seemed irrelevant. From the bottom of the vortex, something unfathomably large began to rise. Not a creature in any earthly sense, but a shape that defied human architecture. A moving structure that made skyscrapers look like grains of dust. Its surface was patterned with the same ridges seen in the California fissures. Spines, cables, and plates shifted in slow mechanical motions, but its presence felt alive. The heartbeat changed. It wasn't random anymore. It was a countdown. Day 70. Around the globe, every fissure, every black spire, every strange vegetation bloom began to retract inward, as though being drawn back toward a single point. The floating land masses and seawater converged toward the rising structure. The sky darkened. Not with clouds, with it. It was no longer above the stars. It was the stars, blotting out every point of light except its own red pulses. Cities went dark. Power grids failed permanently. The last broadcasts from emergency networks carried one final message before silence. This is not the end. This is the return. And then nothing. The heartbeat stopped. The world stood imperfect, unbearable. Stillness. Until the knock came again. Once, twice, 3 times, and this time something answered from below. Day 71. The answering knocks from below weren't echoes. They were deeper, older, and so powerful they rattled the planet's molten core. Volcanoes across the globe erupted simultaneously, not with lava, but with blinding columns of red light that shot into the sky like beacons from each volcano. Fragments of something metallic rained down, not debris, but keys. They pulsed in the same rhythm as the countdown heartbeat, embedding themselves into the ground as if searching for a lock. Day 72. The sky was now a lattice of moving shadows, the colossal shape above tightening its grip on the planet. It didn't orbit. It anchored, connecting strands of itself into the earth through the black spires. The countdown reached its final cycle. The lens in the Pacific rotated fully for the first time, and what lay beneath it became horrifyingly clear. The structure wasn't emerging from the ocean floor. The ocean floor was part of it. For millennia, the thing had been embedded within the planet, hidden beneath tectonic plates and seas, using Earth as its shell. Day 73. When the countdown ended, the heartbeat transformed into a single, sustained tone. Every human who heard it, awake or asleep, collapsed. Some never woke again. Those who did found themselves changed. Eyes reflected the same red glow. They spoke in unison, their voices layered with something inhuman. We have returned to our anchor. You were the warmth. You were the silence. Now you will be the bridge. All over the world, these bridges began to walk toward the fissures, disappearing into the black surfaces. Armies tried to intervene, but every weapon fired simply dissolved into ash before impact. Day 74. The final act began. The massive form above the Earth unfurled, revealing tendrils that wrapped completely around the planet's equator. With a slow, steady pull, it began to lift. The continents groaned. Mountain ranges shifted. The oceans churned like boiling water. And then the stars moved. It wasn't the Earth being lifted. It was space itself bending around us. The anchor was detaching. The planet wasn't being destroyed. It was being taken. Day 75. The red light dimmed. The heartbeat faded. For the first time in months, the world was silent. In the dark sky, a new horizon appeared. Not of land or sea, but of impossible structures stretching across the void, lit by alien suns. The Earth was no longer in its solar system. No one knew where we were going, only that we were not alone. Day 81. We woke to a different sky. Not blue, not black, not deep, endless crimson. Streaked with veins of gold light that shifted like rivers across the heavens, the air was breathable. But heavier, every breath felt like it carried. Wait, the oceans were gone, replaced by a vast, glassy surface that reflected the sky like a mirror. Where forests once stood, colossal towers of black stone now rose. Humming faintly in sync with the ancient heartbeat, we were no longer on Earth, or perhaps we still were, but Earth had been folded into something else. Day 82. The bridges, the humans taken into the fissures, began to emerge from the black towers. Their bodies were marked with glowing lines, their movements unnaturally smooth. They spoke rarely, but when they did, the voice was not their own. The anchor holds, the harvest begins. Day 85. Across the new landscape, enormous gateways began to open, vertical slits of light in the air, revealing worlds beyond comprehension, oceans of liquid fire. Cities suspended in the void, forests made of crystal that sang when the wind passed. Through and from each gateway, they came. Not monstrous in the human sense, no claws, no teeth, just towering forms of shifting geometry, impossible to look at directly. Each step they took reshaped the ground beneath them. They didn't speak. With mouths, they spoke through us. Day 90. We learned the truth. The return wasn't an invasion. It was a retrieval. Earth and everything on it had always been theirs. We were not a separate creation, but the byproduct of their long absence. The planet had been their seed, left to grow while they traveled the deep void. Humanity was the soil's bloom, and now the harvest was due. Those chosen as bridges would carry what we had learned, felt and built into their vast network of worlds. The rest of us would be recycled. Not in cruelty, simply as part of a cycle. Older than the stars we once knew. Day 91. The heartbeat pulsed one final time, louder than ever before. The ground split open, the sky folded inward, and we were lifted, every living thing, into the light. There was no pain, no fear. Only the overwhelming sense that we had never truly been alone, never truly belonged to ourselves. As the last fragments of the world dissolved into the crimson sky, the voice spoke one last time. The anchor is home. The silence is over. And then there was nothing, only the heartbeat. Forever.